She was standing by the window, watching the rain pour down against the glass, when she heard the front door open. Her husband walked in first, shaking off his umbrella, and behind him stood a man she had never seen before. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair cropped close to his head and eyes that seemed to take in everything at once. He wore a simple black suit, no tie, and there was something about the way he carried himself that made her heart skip a beat. Her husband smiled at her, that distracted smile he always wore these days, and said the words that would change everything. "This is Nathan. He's going to be your new bodyguard. I've hired him to keep you safe while I'm away on business." She looked at Nathan, and he looked at her, and in that single moment, something passed between them that neither of them could explain. Something dangerous. Something inevitable. Before I continue with this story, please take a moment to like this video, subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and share this with someone who loves stories like this. Your support means everything and helps us bring more incredible stories to you. Now, let me tell you, this story is based on true events, and what happened next will leave you absolutely speechless. Her name was Camille, and she was 34 years old when this story began. She had been married to Gregory for 8 years, and from the outside, their life looked perfect. Gregory was a successful investment banker who had built his fortune from nothing. He came from a small town, worked his way through college on scholarships and part-time jobs, and climbed the corporate ladder with a determination that bordered on obsession. By the time he was 40, he was worth more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. He bought Camille everything she ever wanted. A mansion in the hills with 12 bedrooms and a pool that overlooked the city. A closet full of designer clothes. Jewelry that sparkled under every light. Cars that cost more than most people's houses. But what he couldn't buy her was his time. What he couldn't give her was his presence. What he couldn't offer her was the warmth she desperately craved. Camille had met Gregory at a charity gala when she was 25. She was working as an assistant to one of the event coordinators, running around with a clipboard and an earpiece, making sure everything went smoothly. Gregory had noticed her immediately. She was beautiful, yes, with long auburn hair and green eyes that seemed to glow in the candlelight, but it was more than that. There was something about the way she moved, the way she smiled at everyone she passed, the way she handled every crisis with grace and calm. He asked her to dance that night, and she said yes, even though she wasn't supposed to fraternize with the guests. They talked for hours after the event ended, sitting on the steps outside the venue while the catering staff cleaned up around them. He told her about his dreams, his ambitions, his plans to change the world. She told him about her simple life, her small apartment, her hopes of one day finding someone who would love her completely. He promised her he would be that someone. He promised her forever. For the first few years, he kept that promise. They traveled the world together. They spent lazy Sundays in bed, talking about nothing and everything. They cooked dinner together, even though they could afford a private chef. They made love like they were the only two people on earth. But then his company started growing, and the demands on his time increased. The business trips that used to last a few days stretched into weeks. The phone calls that used to be rare became constant, interrupting their dinners, their conversations, their intimate moments. Camille tried to be understanding. She tried to be supportive. She told herself that this was temporary, that things would slow down eventually, that he was doing all this for them, for their future. But years passed, and nothing changed. If anything, it got worse. Gregory became a stranger who lived in her house, a man she saw briefly in the mornings before he rushed off to meetings, and barely at night when he came home exhausted and fell asleep before she could say more than a few words. The loneliness crept in slowly, like water seeping through cracks in a foundation. At first, she filled her days with activities. She took up painting. She volunteered at local charities. She hosted dinner parties for Gregory's business associates, playing the role of the perfect wife with a smile that never quite reached her eyes. But none of it filled the emptiness inside her. None of it replaced the connection she had lost. She started sleeping in the guest bedroom, telling herself it was because Gregory's snoring kept her awake, but really it was because lying next to him felt lonelier than lying alone. She stopped reaching for him in the night because the rejection had become too painful. She stopped hoping he would notice her new dress, her new haircut, her desperate attempt to recapture his attention. She simply existed, a beautiful ghost haunting her own life. Then came the threats. Gregory had made enemies over the years. That was inevitable in his line of work. He had closed deals that destroyed other people's businesses. He had made decisions that cost people their livelihoods, their homes, their dreams. Most of them accepted their losses and moved on. But one man did not. His name was Victor Blackwell, and Gregory had ruined him completely. Victor had been a competitor, a smaller firm that stood in the way of one of Gregory's biggest acquisitions. Gregory had crushed him without mercy, using every legal trick in the book and some that walked the line of legality. Victor lost everything. His company, his savings, his marriage, his reputation. And then he lost his mind. He started sending letters to Gregory, rambling pages filled with threats and accusations. He showed up outside their house late at night, just standing there, staring at the windows. The police were called multiple times, but Victor was careful. He never did anything they could arrest him for. He was just there, a constant reminder that Gregory had made a dangerous enemy. Gregory decided that Camille needed protection. He couldn't be there to keep her safe, but he could hire someone who could. He contacted a private security firm, one that specialized in personal protection for high-profile clients. They sent him Nathan's file, and Gregory was impressed. Nathan had spent 10 years in the military, including multiple tours in combat zones. After leaving the service, he had worked for various security firms, protecting diplomats, celebrities, and business executives. His record was impeccable. He had never lost a client. He was disciplined, professional, and completely dedicated to his work. Gregory hired him without hesitation, never considering for a moment that bringing this man into their home might create a different kind of danger entirely. The first few weeks were awkward. Camille wasn't used to having someone following her everywhere she went. She felt watched, observed, like a specimen under a microscope. Nathan was always there, a silent presence at the edge of every room. He drove her to her appointments. He stood outside while she had lunch with friends. He accompanied her on her morning walks through the garden. But he rarely spoke. He answered her questions with short, professional responses. He kept his distance, both physically and emotionally. He was doing his job, nothing more. And yet, Camille found herself watching him when she thought he wasn't looking. She found herself wondering about the man behind the stoic facade. She found herself thinking about him at night, when she was alone in the guest bedroom, staring at the ceiling and listening to the silence. It was a small thing that changed everything. A rainy afternoon, much like the day they had met. Camille was in the library, curled up in her favorite chair with a book she wasn't really reading. Nathan was by the door, as always, standing with his hands clasped in front of him, his eyes scanning the room out of habit even though they both knew there was no threat inside the house. The rain was coming down hard, drumming against the windows, and there was a crack of thunder that made Camille jump. She laughed at herself, embarrassed by her reaction, and looked over at Nathan. For a moment, his mask slipped. For a moment, she saw him smile. It was just a small smile, barely more than a twitch of his lips, but it transformed his face. It made him look younger, softer, human. She smiled back at him, and something shifted between them. Something subtle but undeniable. After that day, things were different. Nathan started talking more. He told her about his childhood, growing up on a farm in the Midwest, learning to ride horses before he could ride a bike. He told her about the military, the friends he had made and lost, the experiences that had shaped him into the man he was today. He told her about his failed marriage, how the demands of his job had pushed his wife away, how he had come home one day to find her gone, Nothing left but a note saying she couldn't live like this anymore. Camille listened to every word, fascinated by this man who had seen so much, experienced so much, and yet remained so grounded, so real. In tone, she told him about herself. She told him about her childhood, growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to keep food on the table. She told him about her dreams of becoming an artist, dreams she had abandoned when she married Gregory because he said they weren't practical. She told him about her loneliness, her isolation, her feeling that she had lost herself somewhere along the way and didn't know how to find her way back. They started spending more time together, not just as protector and protected, but as friends. They played chess in the library while the rain fell outside. They watched movies in the home theater, sitting closer than was probably appropriate, sharing popcorn and laughing at the same jokes. They cooked dinner together when Gregory was away, which was most of the time, creating messy, imperfect meals that tasted better than anything the private chef had ever made. Camille felt something she hadn't felt in years. She felt seen. She felt heard. She felt alive. And she knew, with growing certainty, that what she was feeling was dangerous. She was falling for Nathan. She was falling for him hard and fast, and she didn't know how to stop. Nathan felt it too. He had been trained to control his emotions, to keep his feelings in check no matter the situation. But Camille was breaking through every defense he had. He found himself watching her when he should have been watching for threats. He found himself looking forward to their conversations, counting down the hours until they could sit together in the library. He found himself imagining things he had no right to imagine, touching her hair, holding her hand, pulling her close and kissing her until neither of them could breathe. He knew it was wrong. He knew he was crossing lines that should never be crossed. She was his client's wife. She was off limits. But knowing something and feeling something were 2 different things, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't make the feelings go away. The night everything changed started like any other night. Gregory was in Hong Kong, closing yet another deal. Camille was alone in the house except for Nathan and the household staff. She had asked the chef to prepare a simple dinner, just for one, and she ate it alone at the long dining table, feeling the emptiness of the house pressing in on her from all sides. After dinner, she went to the library, as she often did, and found Nathan there, waiting for her. They talked for hours, the conversation flowing easily, naturally, like they had known each other their whole lives. At some point, Camille opened a bottle of wine. At some point, she moved from her chair to the couch, and Nathan sat beside her. At some point, their hands touched, and neither of them pulled away. Camille looked at Nathan, really looked at him, and saw everything she had been missing. She saw warmth. She saw desire. She saw a man who saw her, not as a trophy wife or possession, but as a woman worthy of love and attention. She leaned toward him, her heart pounding in her chest, and he met her halfway. Their first kiss was tentative, questioning, both of them aware that they were crossing a line from which there was no return. But the second kiss was different. The second kiss was fire. It consumed them both, burning away their hesitation, their guilt, their fear. Camille pulled him closer, and he wrapped his arms around her, and for a few perfect moments, nothing else existed. Just the 2 of them, together, finally giving in to what they had been fighting for so long. They spent the night together. In the guest bedroom, where Camille had been sleeping alone for years, they explored each other with a passion that surprised them both. Nathan was gentle but intense, attentive to her every need, making her feel things she had forgotten she could feel. Camille was bold in a way she had never been with Gregory, free by the knowledge that this man wanted her, truly wanted her, not just as a symbol of his success but as a person. When it was over, they lay tangled together in the sheets, breathing hard, staring at the ceiling, neither of them quite believing what had happened. They knew there would be consequences. They knew they had started something that would be impossible to stop. But in that moment, wrapped in each other's arms, they didn't care. The affair continued for months. They were careful, always careful. Nathan maintained his professional demeanor when others were around. Camille played the part of the distant, untouchable wife. But whenever they were alone, whenever Gregory was away and the staff had gone to bed, they came together with a hunger that only grew stronger with time. They made love in every room of the mansion. They whispered secrets in the dark. They made plans, tentative and fragile, about a future where they could be together openly. Camille talked about leaving Gregory. She talked about taking nothing, wanting nothing but her freedom and the chance to start over with a man she loved. Nathan talked about quitting the security business, maybe buying a small house in the countryside, living a simple life far from the complications they had created. It all seemed possible in those quiet moments. It all seemed within reach. But reality has a way of intruding on even the most carefully constructed fantasies. Gregory came home unexpectedly one weekend. His meetings in Tokyo had been cancelled at the last minute, and he decided to surprise his wife. He walked into the house just as Camille was coming down the stairs, her hair still damp from the shower, wearing a silk robe that Nathan had given her as a gift. Gregory noticed the robe. He noticed the way Camille's eyes darted toward the library, where Nathan was standing. He noticed the tension in the air, the guilty flush on his wife's cheeks. Gregory was many things, but he was not stupid. He knew immediately that something was wrong. He didn't say anything at the time. He smiled at Camille, kissed her cheek, and told her he had missed her. But that night, while she slept, he went through her phone. He read the messages between her and Nathan. He saw the photos, the intimate confessions, the evidence of a betrayal that cut him to his core. Gregory confronted them the next morning. He was calm, eerily calm, his voice flat and controlled as he laid out everything he knew. He told Camille she was a liar and a cheat. He told Nathan he was fired and would never work in the security industry again. He told them both that they had made the biggest mistake of their lives, and they were going to pay for it. Camille tried to explain, tried to apologize, but Gregory wasn't interested in explanations or apologies. He was interested in revenge. He wanted them to suffer the way he was suffering. He wanted them to lose everything, just as he felt he had lost everything. He told Camille she would not get a cent in the divorce. He told Nathan he would destroy his reputation so completely that no one would ever hire him for anything. He told them they deserved each other, two pathetic, faithless people who had taken his trust and thrown it away like garbage. Camille was devastated, not because of the threats about money or reputation, but because of the look in Gregory's eyes. Despite everything, despite the loneliness and the neglect and the years of feeling invisible, she had never wanted to hurt him. She had loved him once, truly loved him, and some part of her still cared about him even now. She tried to talk to him, to explain that she hadn't planned this, that she hadn't gone looking for someone else, that she had simply been so lonely for so long that when someone finally saw her, really saw her, she couldn't resist. But Gregory didn't want to hear it. He walked out of the room and didn't speak to her again for days. He communicated only through his lawyers, cold legal documents that outlined the terms of their divorce in clinical, detached language. Nathan was gone. He had packed his things and left the morning of the confrontation, understanding that his presence would only make things worse. He called Camille once, just to tell her he loved her and he was sorry, and then he went silent. She didn't know where he was or what he was doing. She didn't know if he was okay. She spent days in a fog, wandering through the mansion that suddenly felt more like a prison than ever, wondering if she had made a terrible mistake. She had traded her empty marriage for an empty house. She had traded her security for uncertainty. She had traded everything she knew for the chance at something more, and now she wasn't sure if that something more was even possible. Weeks passed. The divorce proceedings were brutal. Gregory was true to his word, using every legal weapon at his disposal to ensure Camille received as little as possible. His lawyers painted her as a gold digger and a cheater, a woman who had taken advantage of a hard-working man's generosity and then betrayed him in the worst way imaginable. Camille's lawyer did her best, but the evidence was overwhelming. There were bank records showing Nathan buying gifts to Camille with his salary, which Gregory's lawyers twisted into something sordid. There were the messages, read aloud in court, private words of love and desire that sounded cheap and tawdry when stripped of their context. There were witnesses, staff members who had noticed the lingering glances, the private conversations, the closed doors. By the end, Camille felt exposed, humiliated, reduced to the worst version of herself in front of strangers who would never understand what she had been through. The divorce was finalized on a gray Thursday afternoon. Camille walked out of the courthouse with nothing but a small settlement that would keep her comfortable but not wealthy. The mansion was Gregory's. The cars were Gregory's. Everything they had built together was Gregory's. She stood on the steps of the courthouse, looking out at the city that suddenly felt foreign and hostile, and wondered what she was supposed to do next. She had no job, no skills, no experience in the real world. She had spent 8 years being a wife, and now she wasn't even that anymore. She was nothing. She was no one. She was starting from scratch at 34, with no idea how to build a life on her own. She found a small apartment in a part of the city she had never visited before. It was modest, just one bedroom and a tiny kitchen, but it was hers. She bought furniture at second-hand stores, learning to appreciate the simple things she had taken for granted during her years of wealth. She got a job at a local gallery, using her art history knowledge and a natural charm to sell paintings to people who reminded her of her former self. She worked hard, harder than she had ever worked before, and slowly, gradually, she started to find herself again. She started painting in her free time, rediscovering the passion she had abandoned so many years ago. She made friends, real friends, people who liked her for who she was rather than what she represented. She started to heal. 6 months after the divorce, there was a knock on her apartment door. Camille opened it, expecting a neighbor or delivery person, and found Nathan standing there. He looked different than she remembered. Thinner, older, with dark circles under his eyes that suggested sleepless nights. But his eyes were the same, warm and intense and focused entirely on her. He said he was sorry for disappearing. He said he had needed time to sort out his life, to deal with the fallout from their affair. Gregory had made good on his threats. Nathan had been blacklisted from the security industry. He had lost his apartment, his savings, everything he had worked for. But he had also had time to think, to realize what truly mattered to him. And what truly mattered to him was her. He loved her. He had always loved her. And he wanted to know if she still loved him too. Camille looked at this man who had given up everything for her, this man who had shown her what it meant to be truly seen and truly loved, and she felt tears streaming down her face. She had spent 6 months wondering if what they had was real or just an illusion born of loneliness and desperation. She had spent 6 months trying to convince herself that she was better off alone, that she didn't need anyone, that she was strong enough to face the world by herself. But standing there, looking at Nathan, she knew the truth. She loved him. She had never stopped loving him. And whatever challenges they would face together, whatever struggles lay ahead, she wanted to face them with him by her side. They didn't get married right away. They both understood that they needed time to build a relationship on solid ground rather than on the shaky foundation of a secret affair. Nathan found work as a carpenter, using the skills he had learned as a boy on his father's farm. He started his own small business, building custom furniture that quickly became popular with the wealthy clients who valued craftsmanship and quality. Camille continued to work at the gallery, eventually becoming a partner, and she kept painting, her work growing more confident and expressive with each passing year. They lived simply, in that small apartment at first and later in a modest house they bought together. They didn't have much, but they had each other, and that was enough. Gregory moved on as well, though not in the way anyone might have expected. The stress of the divorce and the scandal of his wife's affair took a toll on his health. He had a minor heart attack a year after the divorce was finalized, and it served as a wake-up call. He started to reassess his priorities, to question the life he had been living. He realized that he had been so focused on building his empire that he had forgotten to build a life. He had neglected Camille, not because he didn't love her, but because he had convinced himself that providing for her was the same as being there for her. He had been wrong. He had lost her because of his own choices, his own failures. And while he couldn't undo the past, he could learn from it. He stepped back from his company, delegating more responsibility to his partners, and started spending his time on things that actually mattered. He reconnected with old friends. He traveled to places he had always wanted to see. He even started dating again, eventually meeting a woman who understood what he needed and wasn't afraid to demand his time and attention. Years later, Camille and Nathan got married in a small ceremony on the beach. There were no photographers from Society magazines, no hundreds of guests in designer clothes, no ice sculptures or champagne fountains. There was just them, a handful of close friends, and the sound of the waves crashing against the shore. Camille wore a simple white dress she had bought off the rack. Nathan wore a suit he had owned for years. They exchanged vows they had written themselves, promises to love and cherish each other, to be present, to never take each other for granted. When they kissed, sealing their commitment, Camille felt a peace she had never known before. She had walked through fire to get here. She had lost everything and found herself in the process. And now, finally, she was home. The story of Camille and Nathan spread quietly, whispered among friends and acquaintances, a cautionary tale about the dangers of neglect and the power of connection. Some people judged them harshly, calling their relationship a symbol of betrayal. Others defended them, arguing that you cannot help who you fall in love with, that sometimes a heart knows things a mind refuses to accept. But Camille and Nathan didn't care about other people's opinions. They knew the truth of their own story. They knew the pain they had caused and the price they had paid. They knew that their love had been forged in fire, tested by adversity, and proven stronger than anything that had tried to break them apart. Camille often thought about the woman she had been before Nathan came into her life. That lonely, desperate woman staring out the window at the rain, waiting for something she couldn't name. She thought about all the years she had wasted, trying to be what Gregory wanted her to be, trying to fit into a life that had never truly fit her. She thought about the courage it had taken to walk away from everything she knew, to risk everything for the chance at something more. And she knew, with absolute certainty, that she would do it all again. Every painful moment, every tear, every sleepless night. It had all led her here, to this life, to this love, to this man who looked at her like she was the most precious thing in the world. Nathan often thought about the soldier he had been, the man who had believed that emotions were weakness, that vulnerability was dangerous, that the only way to survive was to keep everyone at arm's length. He thought about his failed first marriage, the wife who had left him because he couldn't let her in. He thought about all the walls he had built around his heart, all the defenses he had constructed to protect himself from pain. And he marveled at the woman who had broken through every single one. Camille had seen past his armor. She had reached the man beneath the soldier. She had taught him that strength wasn't about hiding your feelings, but about having the courage to feel them fully. She had saved him in ways he hadn't even known he needed saving. Their life together wasn't perfect. They argued sometimes about money and chores and the small irritations that come with sharing a life with another person. They had moments of doubt, moments when the ghosts of their past came back to haunt them. Camille sometimes woke up in the middle of the night, reaching for Nathan in a panic, afraid that he had disappeared like everything else good in her life. Nathan sometimes caught himself watching her with other men, a flicker of jealousy that he hated himself for feeling. But they worked through it all. They talked about their fears instead of hiding from them. They chose each other, day after day, even when choosing each other was hard. And that, they discovered, was what love really meant. Not the grand gestures or the passionate declarations, but the daily choice to show up, to be present, to keep trying even when it would be easier to give up. Victor Blackwell, the man whose threats had brought Nathan into Camille's life in the first place, eventually got the help he needed. After another breakdown, his family finally intervened, placing him in a facility where he could receive proper treatment for his mental health issues. He wrote a letter to Gregory years later, apologizing for the fear he had caused, explaining that he had been lost in his own pain and unable to see past it. Gregory accepted the apology, recognizing in Victor's words the same kind of obsession that had once driven his own life. They never became friends, but they found a kind of peace with each other, two men who had both learned the hard way that success without balance leads only to destruction. Camille's artwork eventually gained recognition. Her paintings, which explored themes of loneliness, connection, and transformation, resonated with people who had experienced similar struggles in their own lives. She had several exhibitions, first in small local galleries and later in more prestigious venues. Critics praised her work for its emotional depth and technical skill. Collectors paid substantial sums for the privilege of owning her creations. But Camille never let the success go to her head. She remembered too well what it felt like to have everything and yet have nothing at all. She used her platform to support emerging artists, particularly women who had sacrificed their dreams for the expectations of others. She spoke openly about her own journey, hoping that her story might inspire others to pursue their passions regardless of the obstacles in their way. Nathan's furniture business grew as well, but he never expanded beyond what he could personally oversee. He took on a few apprentices over the years, young people who wanted to learn the craft, and he taught them not just how to build beautiful things, but how to take pride in their work. He found satisfaction in creating objects that would outlast him, pieces that would be passed down through generations, carrying a small part of his spirit into the future. He and Camille often worked side by side in their home studio, he with his wooden tools, she with her paints and canvases, two artists creating beauty in their own ways, content in each other's presence. On their 10th anniversary, Camille and Nathan returned to the beach where they had been married. They walked along the shore as the sun set, their hands intertwined, watching the sky turn shades of orange and pink and purple. Camille thought about how far they had come, how much they had overcome, how lucky she was to have found this man who had changed everything. She thought about the woman she had been, the woman she had become, and the woman she was still becoming. She thought about the future, the years they still had ahead of them, the adventures waiting to unfold. And she felt, for the first time in her life, truly and completely at peace. Nathan stopped walking and turned to face her. He looked at her the way he had looked at her that first day in the library, when his mask had slipped and she had seen the real him for the first time. He told her he loved her. He told her she had saved his life. He told her he couldn't imagine existing in a world where he had never known her. Camille smiled, that warm, radiant smile that had captured his heart all those years ago, and told him she felt exactly the same way. They kissed as the waves lapped at their feet, two people who had found in each other the thing they had been searching for their whole lives. Connection, understanding, love. The story of her husband hiring him for protection and her craving him for passion became just one chapter in a much longer story. A story of redemption and second chances. A story of two people brave enough to pursue happiness even when the whole world seemed aligned against them. A story that proved, beyond any doubt, that love is always worth the risk. Because in the end, what else is there? What else matters more than finding someone who sees you, truly sees you, and loves you not despite your flaws but because of them? What else is worth more than waking up every morning next to the person who makes you feel alive? Camille and Nathan lived out the rest of their days together, growing old in the little house they had built, surrounded by the art they had created and the memories they had made. When Camille finally passed away, at the age of 82, Nathan was holding her hand. He told her he would see her again, that their story wasn't over. It was just beginning a new chapter. She smiled at him one last time, that beautiful smile, and then she was gone. Nathan followed her 6 months later, unable or unwilling to go on without her. They were buried side by side, in a small cemetery overlooking the ocean, where the sound of the waves could serenade them for eternity. Their story was passed down through the years, told and retold by those who had known them, those who had been inspired by them, those who had learned from their example. And somewhere, somehow, their love continued, echoing through time, touching the lives of people who would never know their names but would feel their influence nonetheless. Because that is the power of love. It does not end with death. It does not fade with time. It lives on, in every act of kindness, in every moment of connection, in every heart brave enough to risk everything for the chance at something more. And that, my friends, is a true story of how a husband hired a man for protection, and his wife craved that man for passion. It is a story of betrayal and redemption, of loss and discovery, of the complicated, messy, beautiful reality of human love. It is a reminder that life is too short to spend it lonely and unfulfilled, waiting for happiness that will never come unless we have the courage to reach for it. It is a challenge to all of us to examine our own lives, our own relationships, our own choices, and ask ourselves if we are truly living or merely existing. And it is a promise that no matter how dark things may seem, no matter how hopeless or lost we may feel, love is always waiting just around the corner, ready to transform everything if we are brave enough to let it in. Thank you for watching the story until the end. If it touched your heart, please share it with someone who needs to hear it. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, and remember that every ending is just a new beginning in disguise. Until next time, take care of yourselves and take care of each other.